The cultural obsession with a victorious Nazi Germany often looks like this: a grim alternative history where a brutalist regime dominates the entire globe. The historical reality, of course, is entirely different. By 1945, the regime had collapsed entirely, leaving the burning streets of Berlin in ruins. For 80 years, people have wondered what would happen if that collapse never came. The truth is, the German military came terrifyingly close to winning a war. But coming close to a win and building a lasting empire are two distinct historical phenomena. When assessing this theory, serious historians look past the popular imagination of global domination to require a much more precise definition of winning. Three structural requirements define a lasting empire. First, military isolation, removing Britain. Second, continental domination, defeating the Soviet Union. Third, imperial sustainability. The first two were plausible military thresholds. The third is where the narrative of a victorious Germany falls apart. Applying this rigorous historical framework reveals exactly why a short-term military win would not guarantee a long-term global empire. In 1940, following the evacuation at Dunkirk, Britain stood completely isolated in Western Europe. Germany had a strategic opportunity to force Britain into a peace settlement, either through political pressure or by pursuing Operation Sea Lion. Removing them from the conflict would have allowed Germany to avoid a two-front war, but the German Navy was severely outmatched, and the Royal Air Force retained control of the skies, making a massive channel crossing practically impossible. Failing to decisively secure the West meant any subsequent campaigns in the East carried a fatal flaw: a permanently divided military focus. Despite that divided focus, by 1941, German forces had pushed deep into the Soviet Union, arriving at the gates of Moscow. A prominent historical theory suggests that striking the capital directly might have decapitated the Soviet government. This map of the Soviet Union demonstrates the logistical flaw. The sheer geographic scale, extending thousands of miles east, made total occupation impossible. To survive, the Soviets executed a massive maneuver, relocating entire manufacturing sectors far beyond German bombers. Then came the devastating environmental equalizer of the Russian winter. The same bitter cold that broke Napoleon's army inflicted lethal casualties on German forces and froze their supply lines. Capturing a capital does not erase a vast nation. It leaves an invading army deep in enemy territory with no clear path to surrender. But assume total military victory across Europe was achieved. The real question is how the empire functions the day after the fighting stops. The state's plan for Eastern Europe, known as General Plan Ost, was built entirely around displacement, enslavement, and elimination. It was a system of absolute domination rather than stable governance. The uncompromising brutality of this regime guaranteed perpetual, continent-wide rebellion. Facing constant guerrilla warfare and widespread uprisings would have kept the German military tangled in an endless, highly costly occupation. This flowchart illustrates the regime's economic cycle. The German economy relied on debt, requiring continuous, massive inputs of looted resources to stay afloat. Once there were no new nations left to loot, the astronomical costs of endless occupation would slowly crush that hollow economic foundation. The system was ideologically and economically designed to consume itself, resulting in a victory that could not carry its own weight. Beyond the internal rot of Europe, there was an ultimate external wildcard: the entrance of the United States. America's massive industrial and manufacturing base remained physically isolated from the fighting, operating at full capacity. By 1945, the Manhattan Project was finalizing atomic weapons. The United States would have possessed this technology regardless of the political status of Europe. An overextended, economically drained Germany would have had zero defense against an untouched, nuclear-armed America. This brings us to the consensus among historians. Hitler could have conceivably won a military war, but he could never have built a permanent empire. Governance requires the resources to maintain the peace. Without them, the regime could redraw the map, but it could not keep it.